Today we are discussing the second ARC report and local governance. Now we are discussing the index. First is introduction, second is core principle of local governance, which consists of subsidiarity, subsidiarity, democratic decentralization, delineation of functions, devolution of real terms, convergence, and citizen centricity. Third is common issue in local and urban governance, which consist issues related to 11th and 12th schedule, representation of local government in legislative councils, flexibility in structure, issue related to elections, issues related to SEC, socio-economic caste census, issues related to devolution of functions, issues related in devolution of funds, capacity building for self-governance, and issues in accountability. Fourth is issues particular in rural governance, which consist of functional devolution, devolving regulatory functions to the panchayats, financial functions, resources generated by panchayats, etc., and assessment of centrally sponsored schemes CSS, media, use of ICT, information and communication technology. Fifth is urban governance, which consists of structure of urban governance, finances, types of services provided by urban local bodies, regulatory services, infrastructure services, services for human development. Now we are discussing the first chapter, local governance. Our constitution provides a clear mandate for democratic decentralization not only through the directive principles of state policy, which exhorts the state to promote Panchayati Raj institutions, but more specifically now through the 73rd and 74th amendments of the Constitution, which seeks to create an institutional framework for ushering in grassroots democracy through the medium of genuinely self-governance local bodies in both urban and rural areas of the country. However, despite the constitutional mandate, the growth of self-governing bodies, local bodies, as the third tier of the governance in the country has been uneven, halting and slow. Local democracy is sometimes treated as synonymous with decentralization, but the two are in fact quite distinct. In particular, decentralization is not necessarily conducive to local democracy. In fact, in situations of sharp local inequalities, decentralization sometimes heightens the concentration of power and discourage rather than foster participating among the underprivileged. To illustrate, in some tribal areas where upper caste landlords and traders dominate village affairs, the devolution of power associated with the Panchayati Raj amendments has consolidated their hold and reinforced existing biases in the local power structure. The world today is poised to leave its rural past behind, with cities being the main beneficiaries of globalization. Millions of the people chasing jobs are migrated to cities, both large and small. For the first time in history, more than half the world's population of 3.3 billion is living in the urban complexes. Within the next 2 decades, 5 billion people, that is 80% of the world population, will be living in cities. By contrast, the world's rural population is expected to decrease by 28 million during this same period. Since most of the demographic growth will be Asia and Africa, The crucial question is how nation states will cope with these demographic transitions, especially since most of this urban growth is going to be propelled by the poor. Are our policymakers and society, civil society, with their ill equipped managerial capacities, equipped to deal with the mounting population growth? With this mounting population growth, are our policymakers and civil society, with their ill equipped managerial capacities, equipped to deal with this mounting population growth? Satellite pictures show that together the urban states and urban sites now cover more than 2.8% of the Earth's landmass, an area slightly smaller than Japan, but because our cities are pulsating with the concentrated mass of people, we tend to see them as being larger than what they actually are. A recent UNFPA report on the status of world population has said that India doesn't even recognize pre-urban areas within its urban population and so understates the percentage of the people who need to be funded in plans for urban areas. Peri-urbanization Peri-urbanization refers to the rapid unplanned settlement over large tracts of land in the precincts of the manufacturing facilities on a city's periphery. Such areas lack clear administration. Such areas lack clear administration, suffer from sanitation and water problems, and are transitional zones between the towns and the countryside. The key question, of course, is just how sustainable our urban conglomerates are. The answer to this complex question lies in the kind of consumption patterns our city dwellers are going to adopt. If we continue to foolishly dip into our natural resources, to give a few glaring examples, Brazilian Amazon forests are being torn down to export wood to the United States and Europe, or closer homes, lakhs of the farmers and villagers are being displaced to the build dams in order to provide electricity and water to our metropolis. We will have to pay a heavy price. The interaction between urban and rural growth and sustainability is particularly critical to our future. Preventing environmental degradation and reducing vulnerability of the poor are key interventions that will determine the quality of life in our cities. In India, we are having the worst of urban development in the form of unsustainable slum improvement. We are also having the worst of rural development in the form of ill-designed SEZ, special economic zones. We have made a mess in both because we have not asked what the people want, only what we want for ourselves. To treat rural and urban poverty as somehow separate is to adopt a rather short sighted view of the problem. Rural development supports urban development and vice versa. Another blinkered approach is to regard the urban poor as being a drain on the urban economy. Experts insist that the urban poor are essential to the economy and well being of our cities. The majority may be working in the informal sector, but this sector is not a messy mix of marginalized activities as it tends to be viewed. Rather, it is a competitive and highly dynamic sector which is well integrated into the urban and even the global economy. Over half of the Urban population in most developing nations is being forced to live in slums, with China and India together having 37% of the world's slum. The 2001 census estimated the number of slum dwellers in India at 40.3 million, that is about 14.2% of the population. The majority of those living in these slums are young people below the age of 18. Interpersonal rivalry and insecurity are rising amongst these young people who have been found to be the largest perpetrators of violence. They are also its principal victims. As high prices of urban land affect the poor and the lower middle class, whose population exceeds 50% of the total, the most, it is incumbent upon government to stop all speculative increases in urban land prices. Towards this end, the union state and local state self-governments, that is municipalities, need to undertake legal and administrative reforms. The world sees India as potentially the biggest growth story after China in the coming decades. Some of the cities like Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, and a few cities in China are now taking quantum leaps to become the greatest urban landscapes. Indian cities need to compete with them in a big way. If India is to meet the growing expectations of the global investors, one key test will be how it manages its rapid urbanization. Everything else will flow from how well this is done. We need to create world class cities, big and small, which attract people from within and outside to participate in the economic, social, and cultural activities.